Chapter 1. The Beginning. In the beginning there was nothing, no light, no time, no world, only darkness. Then everything changed. A voice brought light into existence, separating day from night. The skies stretched above, the earth formed below, and the oceans gathered as land rose. Life began to fill the world. Plants covered the earth, creatures filled the seas and skies, and everything existed in perfect balance. Then came humanity, created with purpose and placed in a perfect garden called Eden. It was a world without pain, fear, or death. Everything was in harmony and nothing was broken. There was no suffering, no struggle, and no loss. But this perfect world came with one condition. There was a boundary that could not be crossed, a single rule that had to be obeyed. And the moment that rule would be broken, everything would change forever. Chapter 2. The Fall of Man. In Eden, life was perfect. There was no suffering, no fear, and no death. Humanity lived in complete harmony with everything around them, but perfection did not last. A voice appeared, quiet and persuasive. The serpent did not force or command, but instead questioned and planted doubt. It offered something more, knowledge and power beyond what they had. With one decision, everything changed. They chose to eat the forbidden fruit. In that moment, awareness came, but so did fear and shame. For the first time, they saw themselves differently and tried to hide. The connection they once had was broken. The peace they knew disappeared. Pain entered life, struggle became real, and death became inevitable. Humanity was cast out of Eden, and what was once pure and perfect became fallen and broken. Chapter 3. A world corrupted. As time passed, humanity grew and spread across the earth. Cities were built, families expanded, and life continued. But alongside growth came corruption. Violence increased, greed took hold, and morality began to fade. What was once created in harmony became filled with chaos. People turned against one another, and the world lost its way. Darkness spread across everything. Yet even in this broken world, one man stood apart. His name was Noah. While others embraced corruption, he chose righteousness. While others ignored what was right, he remained faithful. Because of this, he was chosen. He was chosen to survive what was coming next, because the world could no longer continue as it was. Everything had become too corrupt, and a reset was coming. An end to what the world had become, and a new beginning. Chapter 4. The Great Flood. Noah was given a command to build an ark, a massive vessel that would preserve life. He built it while others watched and doubted. Then the sky changed and rain began to fall. At first it was slow, but soon it became relentless. The waters rose higher and higher, covering the Outlived. Cities disappeared, mountains vanished, and everything was consumed. The world was completely flooded, and all that remained was the ark, floating in endless water. Inside it, life was preserved. For days and nights, the storm continued without stopping. Then finally, the rain ceased. The waters slowly began to recede, and a new world appeared. It was clean and empty, offering a second chance. But even after everything that had happened, the question remained whether humanity would truly change. Chapter 5. A Promise to Abraham. From this new beginning, a new story unfolded. A man named Abraham was chosen, not for power, but for faith. He was given a promise that his descendants would become a great nation and that his legacy would shape the future. The journey was long and filled with uncertainty. Years passed and doubt often followed, but the promise remained. Over generations, his family grew into a people. However, their path led them into hardship. They found themselves in a land where they were not free. They became enslaved, oppressed, and controlled. The promise seemed distant and almost impossible. Yet even in suffering, their story was still moving forward. Something greater was still to come, and a change was approaching that would alter everything. Chapter 6. The Exodus. A leader named Moses emerged, chosen to confront power and demand freedom. He stood before kings and refused to back down. Plagues struck the land, one after another, shifting the balance of power. Finally, the moment came when the people were allowed to leave. But their escape was not simple. They were pursued and trapped between an army and the sea. Then the impossible happened. The waters parted, creating a path. They crossed safely. And when the sea closed behind them, their chains were broken. They were finally free. However, freedom came with responsibility. They were given laws, a purpose, and a path to follow. Even after witnessing miracles, they struggled to remain faithful to that path. Chapter 7. Kings and Prophets. A nation was established and a kingdom was formed. Kings rose to power, some ruling with wisdom while others were driven by pride. Over time, corruption began to grow again. The people drifted away from the path they had been given. To guide them, prophets emerged as messengers. They warned of the consequences, urged change, and called the people back to what was right. However, their warnings were often ignored. The distance between what the people were and what they were meant to be continued to grow. With each ignored warning, the consequences became more certain. The kingdom began to weaken and fracture, setting the stage for what would come next. Chapter 8. Exile and Waiting. Eventually, the kingdom fell. Enemies rose and the people were conquered and exiled from their land. Everything they had built was lost. They lost their home, their identity, and their sense of purpose. They were scattered and broken, far from where they belonged. Yet even in exile, hope remained. Promises were remembered, and voices continued to speak of a future restoration. It was said that this was not the end, that a time would come when everything would be made right again. They waited through years, decades, and centuries, holding on to the belief that a Savior would come and fulfill the promise. Chapter 9. The Life of Jesus. After centuries of waiting, a child was born, not into power or wealth, but into simplicity. Despite humble beginnings, his message would change the world. He taught about love, forgiveness, and redemption. He healed the sick, helped the broken, and challenged those in authority. Many followed him and believed in his message, but others resisted and feared him. Over time, opposition grew stronger. Eventually, he was betrayed, arrested, and judged. He was crucified, and it seemed as though everything had come to an end. Hope appeared lost, and it seemed like the story had concluded. But this was not the end. Chapter 10. Resurrection and Revelation. 3 days after the crucifixion, everything changed. The tomb where his body had been placed was found empty. What seemed like a final and irreversible end was not the end at all. Death had been overcome, and hope returned in a way no one expected. Those who followed him, once filled with fear and doubt, now carried a renewed sense of purpose. They began to spread his message beyond their cities, beyond their nations, and across generations. What started as a small movement grew into something that would shape the course of history. His teachings of love, forgiveness, and redemption continued to reach people from every part of the world. Even in the phase of opposition, the message endured and expanded, but the story does not stop with what has already happened. It points forward to something greater still to come. It speaks of a future where everything broken will be restored, where suffering and pain will no longer exist, and where humanity will be made whole again. The story that began in the beginning is still unfolding, moving steadily toward its final resolution. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, hope is never truly lost, and that the end of one chapter can be the beginning of something far greater.